Chapter 7. Media Dominant Use of Dominant Media. You're in the advertising business. You've got a client, a product, a plus difference, and you know how to control your impatience. One of the continuing questions, where to place your advertising. It's an old question and a tough one. Naturally, it often has to be decided before any copy is written. And I think I should say here, if it is not perfectly obvious by now, that advertising in my book is big game. I am not much interested in small space, small billing, small time advertising, which has its own problems and solutions. Also, I don't know a hell of a lot about it at this point, although we started small like almost everybody. 5 words express one of my strongest convictions about media, which is not how many ads, but how powerful, how great the impact. When you are competing in big markets, refrigerators, food, soap, and the like, you need big guns, big space. You need dominant use of dominant media. You need ads at least as impressive as your competitors, even if they have to run less frequently. Even when our advertisers had little money, we bought them pages or double pages in leading magazines, sometimes in color, and would wait all year if necessary to buy another. During that year, we would merchandise those ads until we'd squeezed the last drop of juice out of them. Bulova is a case in point. Money was scarce in the beginning. Yet we ran, as I said, a double-page spread in color in the Saturday Evening Post and merchandised it from hell to kingdom come, from June to December. The dominance of that spread was intended to sell not only the consumer, but the dealer as well. We exposed the advertisement to the trade time after time, although it was the only one that was going to run. Wherever and whenever a dealer saw that ad, naturally he got the impact of a big-time advertiser. He did not ask how often. All he wanted to know was, is it a good ad? Will it sell my goods? It was a good ad, and it would sell his goods, and he knew it. When the date arrived and the spread appeared in the magazine, no other advertiser looked more important than the Bulova watch company. Bulova started off with stature, which is exactly what we were after. It was also vital for Bulova to get display in store windows and on counters, and the big spreads helped us there too. With the ad mounted on board in color and marked Saturday Evening Post, who would doubt that Bulova was a leading watch company? Dealers took the reprints and used them gladly in their windows and on their counters, something they would never have done with quarter-page ads throughout the year. True, if we had taken the money and run columns or quarter pages over the year, we might have got more circulation. But we could never have got the impact, nor the results that came from dominant use of dominant media. An exception to this method is the drug field. The man with an earache or backache or any other ache is searching for help. He needs you more than you need him. He'll spot your ad, little or big, because pain makes him look. What's big to him is the promise of help. You keep on running small space often because you don't know just when a man is going to have his ache. Small space when he's got it is better than big space when he hasn't. Of course, when you're big enough for both frequency and large space, by all means run full pages. In the long run, big space will pay you better. It always does. But above all else, get your copy right. Big space won't sell your goods if the copy itself won't sell them. The need to change your methods as the business changes was strongly brought out to me by the Saturday Evening Post. The Post was once the undisputed king of the weeklies with the greatest circulation in America. 30 years ago, for $7,000 for a black and white page, a lot of money in those days, it delivered a total circulation of 2,190,400 families. How could the Post point out what a great buy it was? Curtis had a man who traveled the country, a persuasive fellow making speeches designed to help bring home the importance and dollar value of ads in the Saturday Evening Post. He made a terrific impact when he said that there were basically 2 ways to reach the people who read the Post. One was to buy advertising in the Post at $7,000 for a full page in black and white. The other was to send a postcard to each reader at a cost of nearly $22,000, over 3 times as much for the postage alone. And that would be just a dull little postcard and nothing more. Well, how could you buy anything but the Post when a man made a statement like that? In the Post, you'd get an ad 6 times the size and save 2/3 the money. Today, it would work out as an even better bargain. Post circulation is 6,634,000. It costs $29,180 for a black and white page. To do what the man said, send postcards, would cost $265,000, about 9 times as much. And now, with the competition of television, postcards seem even more ridiculous. I am sure today the people at the Post have a more timely argument. Nothing illustrates so forcibly the power of a dominant medium as the Kennedy-Nixon debates. They belonged uniquely to television. It was a double strike. The debates proved not only the supreme importance of television as a medium, but the equal importance of using it right. So much more personal than any other medium, television can also be much more revealing of weaknesses and strengths. All America stood by as the two presidential candidates came face to face. All three major networks broadcasted the debates. The Columbia Broadcasting System estimates that 120 million people saw one or all four of them. 120 million. Never in history has any statesman, any orator, anybody at all had such an audience, or such an opportunity. Mr. Kennedy, who had been considered by some as too young and untried, emerged as brilliant, vigorous, and versed in the issues. Mr. Nixon appeared tired, worn, and harassed. John Kennedy had prepared himself down to the last detail. Richard Nixon assumed that because he was a good lawyer and debater, and an established political personality, he would easily demolish his opponent. Many people believe these debates were the decisive factor in that election. According to Theodore H. White in The Making of the President, Kennedy himself said that it was TV more than anything else that turned the tide. Doubtful, apathetic, and even hostile voters rallied to his side. By the time the debates were over, the position of the two candidates had reversed itself. Kennedy, who had been running behind Nixon, now showed on the Gallup poll with 49%, while Nixon dropped to 46%. What's the lesson in it for business? Look for dominance in a medium or in a debate. Now you have two major media instead of one. You may be using television because you think it the best buy for your money. Magazines, too, are the best buy for your money. America built its business to gigantic size on print advertising alone before radio. If you want to know whether people still read magazines, take a look at magazine circulation. It has grown from 147 millions in 1950 to 197 millions in 1962, 88% of the families in the country. What a marketplace for your goods. Take a look also at the growth of magazines such as Life, Look, McCall's, Reader's Digest, and others. And everyone is paid for at a higher price than ever before. Using one major medium instead of both is operating like a one-armed paper hanger when you could have two strong arms. When you use the two, you're bound to do your job faster. Build your business faster. It's a wise advertiser who sees the multiplicity of medium as a multiplicity of opportunity. Perhaps of all the businesses in which advertising is used to move merchandise, none is more significant than groceries. Here are packaged goods with labels on the outside. Virtually nothing to attract the consumer save the label itself. Without advertising, the product stands still. With advertising, the goods move, and if the advertising is powered right, sales climb quickly upward. An article that appeared in Fortune magazine told some startling news. 90% of all the advertising done by Procter & Gamble, Lever Brothers, Colgate, and the like goes into television. That means only 10% for other media. Of course, this is proof that television moves the goods and moves them at the lowest cost per dollar. But this is not the end. It is no cause for despair. It is rather a challenge. There's no reason why magazines cannot move as much per dollar and more. Magazines and television are not in a contest for the same dollar. There are dollars for each as long as each moves the goods. When you stop to think of it, with the exception of McCall's, magazines have changed very little over a long period of years. As a rule, they are run by editorial departments who often look upon advertising as an annoyance rather than as a help. As a matter of fact, they seem to look down on advertising as a necessary evil. Many are too swank to take a hand in placing the ads. They give the impression that it is beneath the editorial department to move in such company. An extreme example of this occurred during the time the Ladies' Home Journal was ahead of them all in circulation. The Goulds, co-editors of the magazine, had a strict rule that they would not talk advertising to anybody. As a matter of fact, this rule applied to their entire editorial staff. Advertising was advertising and would be handled only by the advertising department. It is downright silly to assume that an editorial department loses its independence because it communicates with the people who sell the space. Space salesmen are more welcome to both advertisers and agencies if they have something more to talk about than rates and circulation. Practically all buyers of space already have that information. That's what rate cards are for. What the agencies and advertisers want to know more about is what the magazines are about. And only from the editors can the space salesman get such information and be in a position to pass it along. When you look at television, you find an entirely different situation. Here you find that the show and the commercial belong to the advertiser. Because of this, the entire television organization works closely with the advertiser. In television, the advertiser gets credit from the consumer for the fine shows put on the air. The advertisers are the subject of conversation at home and in clubs. This is extra goodwill that television delivers that no other form of advertising does. Delivers in addition to the outright selling done during the show itself. McCall's has found part of the answer to this. The policymakers have revolutionized the magazine, building its circulation to 8 million, and they are going further. But this is not yet the full answer. There is still the problem of adding goodwill to magazine advertising. There is still the problem of the reader seeing your advertisement by design, not just by accident. There are still things to be done. It is no longer simply a question of beating yesterday. It is a question of coming up to today and being ready for tomorrow. The story begins with William Randolph Hearst, a dynamic publisher whose vista was the world. With Muriel Goddard, an editor who was by all odds a genius, who knew love and geometry, hatred and the Bible, and told it all sensationally in the American Weekly. With Albert J. Kobler, a powerful salesman with the New York Globe and itching to be with the American Weekly. And later with Mortimer Berkowitz, whose drive in selling the American Weekly surpassed even that of Al Kobler. The sensationalism that was the American Weekly was all Muriel Goddard. He wrote about it in his book What Interests People, and Why. He never apologized for sensationalism. On the contrary, he supported it. He said in his book, "Because a thing is sensational, it is not necessarily objectionable or unfit to print. The more extraordinary, unexpected, and sensational, the more likely to be interesting. When the mind is set aglow, we have emotions. And the oldest, most deeply rooted sense and emotion reactions were implanted when man was an animal. They are still with us. They are a natural, normal inheritance and must not be overlooked." Further, he said, "The American Weekly, if it is to hold the interest of its 5,500,000 family audience week after week, must deal with the fundamentals of human interest. They are not many in number, but they offer infinite variety in their details and possible combinations. How about these fundamentals are love, hate, fear, vanity, evil-doing, morality, selfishness, immortality, superstition, curiosity, veneration, ambition, culture, heroism, science, amusement." The American Weekly, as edited by Goddard, intrigued Al Kobler, the salesman. He watched it week after week, saw its great circulation. He believed it could be sold to advertisers even though it carried little or no advertising at the time. Edward A. Westfall of the New York Globe had been hired by the Hearst organization in the early 20s. He knew Kobler, knew what he thought of the American Weekly, and recommended him for the job to S.S. Carvalho, Hearst general manager. Carvalho talked with Kobler and then arranged a meeting with Mr. Hearst. Little is known of what went on in that meeting, but it was held in Hearst's office at 86th Street and Riverside Drive, and Kobler walked out of it with the job he wanted. He was in charge of selling advertising in the American Weekly. He took the job for a modest salary plus commission. He wound up earning $400,000 a year. If anybody knew the importance of Muriel Goddard as an editor, it was Al Kobler. He used it to the hilt. They appreciated one another, and he and Goddard worked as one. It paid off as advertising sales grew to millions of dollars a year. The Biow Company was among the first to buy color spreads in the American Weekly. Mr. Hearst and Mr. Kobler became close friends. They both had a great interest in antiques. Mr. Hearst especially would buy them almost wherever and whenever they were offered for sale. But in spite of this friendship, one thing came to worry Mr. Hearst. Now that the American Weekly had become a formidable magazine, he had something to protect, and Kobler did not protect it. Kobler was in no sense an organization man. He worked alone. Whenever he was out sick, he left a vacuum. When his temperature went up, advertising in the American Weekly went down. This happened several times, and Hearst could not put up with it. Knowing that sooner or later Kobler would have to go, Mr. Hearst moved Mortimer Berkowitz to New York from the Hearst offices in Boston. Mr. Berkowitz tells us that he said to Mr. Hearst then, "I can't work with Kobler, and Kobler won't work with me." In any event, Berkowitz was transferred to the American Weekly in 1926 as a salesman. At the end of 6 months, he was appointed advertising manager, and Kobler left with $1 million. Mr. Hearst paid him this for his contract with the American Weekly. Typically big, typically bold, typically Hearst, Berkowitz immediately started to build an efficient sales organization of some 75 people, many of them earning up to $75,000 a year. Orders came in from Simmons Beds, from the Babbitt Company, from General Electric's Household Products Division. And then came such accounts as Ford, Chrysler, Buick, and Pontiac. None of these had ever used the American Weekly before. All this new business excited Mr. Hearst so much that he said, "It proves the American Weekly has the greatest buying readership in the country." He had turned salesman himself. Advertising sales continued to grow even more, and profits soared accordingly. Berkowitz's own salary rose to a peak of $250,000. But when Goddard died in 1938, after 42 years with the magazine, the genius that made the American Weekly died with him. No one knew this better than Berkowitz. Editors were moved up, but none of them possessed what Goddard had had, that great understanding of basic human nature and the ability to appeal to it in terms of pure sensationalism. And the nation was changing. In spite of this depreciation of the editorial content of the magazine itself, Berkowitz managed to keep it going. Then in World War II, the government ordered the consumption of paper reduced. Even at this smaller size, Berkowitz kept on selling pages at the same price. The nation kept changing. But the American Weekly's changes were not for the better. The new size and the loss of Goddard were too much. They began to take their toll. It is interesting to note that Berkowitz stayed with the American Weekly until 1951, the year Mr. Hearst died. The American Weekly tried building again, but building was hard. Hearst, Goddard, Kobler, Berkowitz were no longer there. The nation continued to change and was exposed to changes in media. Now, as this is being written, we learn that the American Weekly will be no more. The saga is ended. What's in it for us mourners? A lesson. Be ready to change. Stay ahead of the game. Change for the better, not for change's sake. Be dominant. Smitty, we called him. Walter Granville Smith is his proper name. Procter & Gamble suggested one day that we enlarge our media department, and I went to it. Many men came to see us, but none attracted me more than Walter Smith, then media director at another agency. He had something we definitely wanted, and I knew it. What was it? Smitty was in every sense an all-around advertising man who specialized in media buying. Media man or not, he knew good copy when he saw it, and got all excited about it. He wanted to place it. His enthusiasm got better space for it. He bought the concept of important use of important media, and this meant a lot to me. His own ideas were similar. When I asked him whether his former agency had supported him in this, he said, "Hell no, that's why I'm here talking with you." I never closed a deal as quickly as I did with Walter Smith, and I was never happier. He soon became a vice president of the Biow company. It was then that I walked into his office and said, "Now you're a vice president, let's go out and have an ice cream soda to celebrate." Smitty gulped hard. Then he grabbed his hat and said, "Sure, let's go." I didn't know that he had an aversion to ice cream sodas. Even one was too much for him, and he vowed to himself that he would get even. Some days later, Mr. Smith and I were closing an important account for the Biow company. When it was all finished, he said, "Let's celebrate." I smiled. "By having a scotch and soda," he said. I never drank in my life. Not that I objected, I just didn't drink. And Smitty knew it, although I didn't know that he knew it. Sitting down in the nearest bar, he said, "Okay, Mr. Biow, lift your glass. Let's drink a toast to our new account." This time I gulped hard and drank. Not much of it, but I did drink. Smitty wrote me the other day to say, when I asked to pick his brains and memory, that he liked the salad days, he meant ice cream soda days, of course, of the Biow company because even though it was a one-man show, I knew how to delegate authority. Biow abhorred mediocrity, he wrote, and if you had any taint of it, you were really dead. But if you met his standards, you could stand tall. The magazine's problem is their prime opportunity. And a prime opportunity is what any young ad man, the client's advertising manager, the agency man, or the space salesman should look for. If the soap manufacturers have invested 90% of their money on television, this means, for the man in magazines, the man interested in selling print advertising, that 90% of the weight is against him. Why is it against him? Why is this a prime opportunity? Because it shows where he's got to go. The 90% figure is shocking. There are two ways of looking at it. One is that any other medium is hopelessly encumbered, outweighed, outclassed. Another is that the figure points to a target. But to compete, you have to know what you're up against. Magazines quite simply do not offer as much hospitality to the advertiser as television. The economics of television favor the advertiser as well as the medium itself. When you put out a magazine, your payroll increases as business comes in. On TV, it's just the opposite. When the network gets a sponsor, they take off a network show which they've been paying for. It's more profitable, more flexible to be able to do things and to continue to produce audience. That sort of thing doesn't happen in magazines. Also, a magazine carries your ad, and people see it if they like the story that is adjacent to it. Or if in turning quickly, you can manage to catch their eyelashes at the right point. Not so on TV. They might not like your show, but it's your show. Perhaps magazines might adapt the television idea of having an advertiser present each piece of material. Naturally, this will meet with screams from the sensitive, but at least the advertising wouldn't be seen by accident that way, alongside the editorial material that happens to get read. This still sounds like a stacked deck up against a color print. But let's take color. Television won't fulfill its potential until color comes into wide use. It's a long time getting there. For the present, a magazine can reproduce food and fashion better and more beautifully than television. A magazine reader reads at his own pace, and if he is interested in an ad or a story, he gets to look at it and look at it again. Sure, TV moves, it talks, some of it is even in color. That's an incalculable advantage, but it isn't the only way to present material. Television is deeply interested in having an audience. To get this audience, it does not depend on television alone. It advertises big in newspapers and in magazines. We must always remember that this is in addition to the space the newspapers devote to the daily program listings as a part of their editorial policy. If NBC, and ABC can spend millions upon millions of dollars in newspapers and magazines to advertise their shows and increase their audience, why can't you use newspapers and magazines to advertise your product and increase your sales? Now, let's move on to the dominant medium. But first, a pair of shoes is missing. Dr. Larry Deckinger was always looking for his shoes. It could be because he's a genius. What genius has to do with wearing shoes, I don't know. But they seem to go together in his case. In meetings at the Biow company, he would take off his shoes almost as soon as he sat down. He could think better with them off. He would go from office to office and suddenly find he was walking around in his stocking feet. Then the whole research department went all out for a major task, looking for his shoes. Larry came to us from the cloisters of New York University, where he taught mathematics. While there, he earned his doctorate with a thesis on audience size measurements. At that time, he disliked the business world, wanted nothing to do with it, but I knew his ability and wanted him in our research department. With him, we would have none of the hokum that stands in the way of objective research. He would be new, crisp, fast, and above all, honest. He was hard to convince, but I finally persuaded him to join the Biow company in 1937. He did a brilliant job. He had nothing to unlearn. He simply went ahead, continually finding new fields of research, recommending new ideas, finding the answers to many of our questions. He became the head of our research department of 40 people and built what I believe was one of the great research departments in the business. Dr. Deckinger checked my facts on this one, as he has done so many times before, and he is, at the present time, I believe, still looking for his shoes. In the overall picture, television and radio might be considered together, but there is a big difference between them, A big difference in the amount of money you spend, in the risk you take, and in the shows themselves, which today are controlled almost entirely by the networks. There are those who look at television as if it wakened Aladdin's lamp. All you have to do, they think, is to buy some of it, and your pockets will suddenly be lined with gold. Unhappily, today's television graveyard is filled with advertisers who had more blind faith than sense. The profitable use of television requires the same business perspicacity as the advantageous location of a factory site, the negotiation of a favorable union contract, or sound retail pricing. Here are a few of the areas in which the right decision can make you rich, and the wrong decision can send you to the poorhouse. Daytime television is efficient compared to nighttime television. It only costs a fourth as much, a big difference for the advertiser of household items whose target is housewives. But the choice doesn't come easily. There are many other factors in media choice besides cost. For example, if you decide to buy only daytime because it's cheaper, what about the 25 million of our 68 million adult women who work for a living? Very few are in a position to say to the boss, "It's 11 o'clock and I'm going to look at The Price is Right for the next half hour." Can you afford not to talk to those women? If you must talk to them, you have to buy nighttime. But if you buy evening TV time at 4 times the cost, you may spread your advertising so thin that you end up not reaching enough people, often enough to get anybody to do anything about your product. It's a puzzling choice, and the correct decision in a given situation can make the difference between a spectacular success and a spectacular flop. Answer: 1. Never spread too thin. 2. If you have the cash, don't ignore a good audience. Another fundamental problem that the buyer of television time must solve is the question of when he should make the purchase of program and time. The broadcast season starts in September. By the preceding January, network sales have started. What should you do? Commit early and run the risk of overpaying? Or wait for the prices to start coming down, as they will inevitably for unsold time? If you decide to wait, how are you to know when it is the right moment to buy? Though prices are lower, are there still television properties worth buying? In other words, watch out. Waiting can be a dangerous game. You can find yourself holding your money instead of spending it because there is nothing left worth spending it on. Buying at the right moment can affect tidy savings for the cagey buyer. He can find himself often paying less for a minute in property X than another advertiser who bought earlier. But on the other hand, if the program begins to move before he buys, he might find himself, as has happened from time to time, in the embarrassing position of having to pay more than the earlier buyer, or of not being able to buy in. In the long run, supply and demand rule in television sales as in every other phase of our economy. Here's another problem in buying today. Should you buy into a program whose record has stood the test of time and which has managed to get itself an audience in past years, one that will probably not be a sensational success next year but not a failure either? Or should you allow yourself to be hypnotized by the glamour and potential of an entirely new program and buy that? It's a risk. The records show that, on the average, new programs are about twice as risky as established ones. 2/3 of the new ones fail. 1/3 of the old ones fail. That means about 50% of all of them fail. What you as an advertiser must decide is it wiser in the long run to buy a proven property or a program that has still to prove itself? On odds, the older show is the best buy. All you have to decide is when to run against the odds. The high cost of participating in television has brought with it a new phenomenon: the scatter plan. The scatter plan permits the advertiser to spread the risk over a number of shows. Instead of buying one show, he buys a little of several. He won't be spectacularly successful, but neither will he be a spectacular failure. The risk is so great and the cost so high that an advertiser plays it safe when he buys pieces of several shows rather than all of just one. Before the new season starts, the advertiser has no way of knowing that any new competitive show will be a runaway hit and kill his show. But if he puts all his eggs in one basket, great as the show might seem, he does take the risk of finding himself opposite a program that might turn into another Beverly Hillbillies, or Lucy, or Untouchables, and rob him of the audience he had hoped to get. One more phenomenon of television is the repeat show. To keep costs of programming down, more and more episodes of more and more programs are being run a second and even a third time in a given season. The unexpected byproduct of this practice is that there is no evidence that repeats on continuing shows fare any less successfully than the originals. Walt Disney, for example, uses 26 new and 26 repeat shows on Sunday. In the 1962 to 63 season, his first 26 shows averaged a 36 rating. His 26 repeats averaged a 35. But look out. There must be a breaking point somewhere. There is a breaking point in repeating commercials, too. You may call it continuity or emphasis, but if it becomes downright monotony when you repeat the same poor commercial over and over again, boy, you're in trouble. It's amazing how an intelligent advertiser spending millions of dollars on a given television show for the sole purpose of selling his product will repeat the same poor commercial time and time again until it not only fails to sell but often works the other way. I know full well what it means to get the right idea, how difficult it is to find, how dangerous it is to change it. I'm not talking about changing it. If you have the right idea, for heaven's sake, stay with it. But there are many ways to use your basic idea and still keep it fresh and alive. This takes time, effort, and money to work out, of course. But it's well worth it. You remember the story of the man who spent his nights in a gambling house and lost money every night. This continued for weeks. His best friends couldn't stand to see him losing, and one finally said, "Why do you go there? You know as well as we do that you'll lose." Being an inveterate gambler, he answered, "Sure, I know I'll lose. But after all, it's the only wheel in town." It's the same story with audience ratings. They are the only wheel in town, and while they are, we have to use them. They are full of imperfections, and like a new baby, they're cute, but not half of what they're going to be. In the meantime, it's a funny thing how the shows that sell the most goods come out at the top of the list so often, and the shows that sell the least come out at the bottom. Ratings or no ratings, this is sure. If in our judgment a show sells enough goods, we stay with it. If it doesn't, we run like hell. Clearly, television is no panacea for sales ills. Used correctly, like any other dynamic medium, it can be a priceless contributor to business success. Used incorrectly, it can defeat you, not just because of the dollars that go down the drain, but because of the lost opportunity and because your competitors might be using their dollars to greater advantage. Television is a fascinating medium. It's a glamour medium and a medium of opportunity. It's a great challenge to ingenuity and to good business sense. Nobody can really tell if a show is good just from seeing it on tape. And what's good? Good for whom? For the audience, for the critics, for the network, or for the client? The men behind Broadway guess wrong many times. How can a guy who owns oil wells spot a successful show before it goes on when the people in the business can't always tell? How did I pick a good show? I guessed like anyone else. Would I do it that way now? Certainly. I'm a gambler in business and always have been. If I saw a show that looked right to me, I'd grab it. But I admit that this is the dangerous way to do it. There is a point where you are gambling, nothing else. And there is a point where you have to have the courage to risk because you feel you are right. Accept the challenge, but look out for the tinsel. That's it for today. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to check our link in the description, where you'll find many other fundamental marketing books in different languages. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more persuasion and direct response content. See you in the next one.